Nobody seems to like Ian Garry. These are the comments from his interview with Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour, where it says, Ian Garry is not liked in Ireland. He's definitely not the pride of Ireland. Brazil can have him. With 149 thumbs up. Now, this goes on as the guy from Brazil says the Africans should take him, then the guy from Africa says the Arabs should take him, and it goes on, and they're all getting upvotes for it. So, my rhetorical question to you is, why don't you like Ian Garry? I'll tell you why I don't really care for Ian Garry. I don't care for him because not since day one, but since around the Neil Magny and Jeff Neal fights, he gave off Ronda Rousey vibes more so than he did Conor McGregor vibes, okay? He comes off as someone who's arrogant, I would say a bit entitled, and he comes off as someone that likes to point the finger at others. Someone who thinks they have things all figured out just because life is going well for him. And not for nothing, man. When Ian Garry first bursted onto the scene, I was one of those people saying, man, good for this kid. This kid seems like he's got a decent head on his shoulders. He's out here living his dream. He's in the UFC. He's winning fights in the UFC. He's got championship potential, perhaps. But over time, the more he's talked, the more he kind of reveals himself to be a bit of a cunt. And when I say that, I'm talking about putting Jeff Neal's mugshot on a t-shirt and selling the shirts and making money off the shirts. Not for nothing, but Jeff Neal's trying to put that behind him. We all make mistakes. We're not in the spotlight, right? We're not world-class athletes in the UFC, so our mistakes don't get broadcasted in headlines the way his does. So I think people could be a little more understanding of the human experience and people making mistakes, because trust me, I'm sure Ian Garry has made some mistakes in his life. Then you have the way he treated Neil Magny for saying something about I'm gonna discipline him the way I discipline my kids, or whatever the case, and he essentially turned that minuscule comment into this big giant mountain of a thing. And he made it to the point where Neil Magny's, I want to say his ex-wife or his baby mother, ended up taking him to court for custody of the kid. And Neil Magny had to testify in court against these statements. These statements that Ian Garry made were brought up in court. So it was just a big mess. And again, he's got a good life going for him, from what we can see on the outside, but he acts as though he's got things figured out, and he doesn't. He's got a lot to learn. He's only 26 years old. He's got a lot more life to live, and he's over here pointing the finger at other people as though he's the moral authority, as if he could just walk around upright like he's got no skeletons in his closet, or he's never made a mistake, or anything like that, So that doesn't sit well with me. And personally, none of this has anything to do with his wife, the WAG. None of this has anything to do with his relationship, the fact that the ex-husband lives with them, or whatever the case may be, whatever that the whole story and fiasco was. MMA Guru made videos about it, and a bunch of people made videos about it, and it became this really big thing. But ultimately, I don't care about that. I really don't. I care about how you fight, for one, and he's a boring fighter. He is a boring fighter. We'll get to that in a moment. But I care more about how you conduct yourself, you know what I mean? And Ian Garry, there's times where he says the right things. There's times where he says, like, yeah, I'm looking to be the great, da-da-da-da. And he says all this stuff, and he says that he wants to be mentioned in the same class as the Demetrius Johnsons of the world, the Anderson Silvas, the George St. Pierres, the John Joneses of the world, the upper echelon elite of the MMA world. But yet he goes out there and he goes to a close decision with MVP. Close to the point where a lot of fans think he lost. A lot of fans think it was a draw. And even Dana White said it was a draw. Me personally, I had it for Ian Garry. I thought, it was pretty clear, but I'm just one guy. Now, with that said, Ian Garry, if Ian Garry was that guy, if he was the spectacular, the future Ian Garry, mentioned next to George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva and all these great people, he should have finished MVP. He should not have went the distance with the 37-year-old, 10 years older than him, MVP. And to pretend as though anyone in his team, himself, should be happy with that decision win is just, you're living in La La Land, essentially. For me, I think Ian Garry, for as much as he talks, he doesn't walk the walk. He talks a big game, but his performances are not that of the spectacular aspirations that he aims for. He wants to go down in history as an all-time great, but he's putting up all-time boring decisions and fights. His fights are kind of they put you to sleep. With all of that said, man, I don't know what it is. Oh, this was a point I wanted to touch on as well. Ian Garry wants people to like him. That's another thing. He wants the world to like him. And when the world started to not like him, when he pulled out of that fight, I forgot who it was supposed to be against. I think it was Jeff Neal the first time, and then they rescheduled it. But when he was first supposed to fight him, he pulled out because of all the hate he was getting, because of all the negativity and negative energy that was aimed at him, because he was going to have to be up on stage with a Colby Covington that was going to say some crazy things at a press conference with him, because he was, seeing these videos that MMA Guru and other top content creators in the MMA space were making about him, and he didn't like it. Ian Garry wants to be a darling. He wants to be someone that people get behind and root for. And in his head, he can't understand or compute why anyone would root against him. He views them as just haters and trolls and things like that. But the truth is, there are some very real criticisms about his character, his behavior, the way he carries himself, and the way, he treats people. And again, it's the fight game. I'm not asking him to bake cookies for his opponent pre-fight and things like that. I'm not asking for all that. Conor McGregor had a great career built off the back of disrespecting his opponents. But again, there's a way you go about it. There's a way that you say something. Conor McGregor went about it differently than Ronda Rousey. And you saw the way the fans treated Ronda Rousey towards the end. And I said it at the beginning of this video, and I'll say it at the end of this video just to tie it all together. Ian Garry gives more Ronda Rousey vibes than he does Conor McGregor vibes. That's just my 2 cents on it. I appreciate you guys for watching the video. If you stayed all the way through, let me know what you think in the comment section below, whether you agree, disagree. It doesn't matter. Just join the discussion, follow for more, and leave a like if you enjoyed the time spent. Thank you. You are all appreciated.